These are the Tudor court novels. This is the Cousins War series. And these are the two books that kind of link them together. These are the books that have adaptations. This is a book featuring a fictional character. And these are all the books narrated by real people. These are the books that have at least one male narrator. And these are the ones that don't. These are the books written in past tense. And these are the books written mostly in present tense. We'll get to that later. And these are the books that have at least one scene written in free, indirect discourse. These are the books where Elizabeth Woodville appears. These are the books where Henry VIII appears. And these are the books where his daughter Elizabeth appears. This is the book about my favorite historical figure. And this is the book about my least favorite historical figure. And those are some books falling down. These are a lot of books, and I've read them all. Let's talk about them right now. I am embracing the Tudor and Plantagenet novels by Philippa Gregory. And yes, this starts at the floor. There's 15 books in it. I think I have 2 doubles. And so I am here to help you embrace it as well. This is kind of my ultimate guide to Philippa Gregory's Tudor and Plantagenet series, which I've read all of. I haven't read her other stuff. I've only read her Tudor and Plantagenet novels. I do have Tidelands, though I will get to it eventually. My apartment is an absolute disaster because I've got a bunch of crap from school cleaning out the classroom, and I'm just about to do like a big cleanup. And we're in the pre-cleanup period. I'm looking over there at the mess, and I'm not going to show you. So let's get started. The Tudor and Plantagenet series. So, I don't know if it should be called the Tudor and Plantagenet series because the Plantagenets ruled for like years, and this is kind of the end of the Tudor and Plantagenet series. I think it should kind of be called like the 15th, 16th century series because I believe this series starts in like 1430 something. I don't know. Let me double check. Starts at the end of the 100 Years' War. So it starts in 1430. And so it starts in 1430 and it ends with the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. So I have that one right here. Let me see when this ends. So this is the last one chronologically. Let's see. So we got 1570 right there, 1572. So like the 1570s. Over 100 years. So like 140 years. I had one kind of roll away. Let me get it. So yeah, it takes place over 100 years, 140 years-ish. So a century and a half, basically. So I don't really think it should be called the Plantagenet and Tudor novels because it doesn't go through the whole Plantagenet dynasty. It doesn't start in like the 1100s when Henry II became king. It starts with where I think you should start. So I disagree with Philippa Gregory about her own books. Then again, she is the author, so she's going to know more about these characters than the average reader is. I think you should start, if you're trying to read the whole series, you should start with the White Queen. This one's about Elizabeth Woodville. So Elizabeth Woodville is the White Queen. I have 2 copies of this, and I did not intentionally buy 2 copies. I bought this one. It got lost in the mail, and I actually got a refund for it. So this is a free book that I got, but it ended up getting here after I'd already bought this one. So this is the one I read out of. Mass market paperback is a first edition. This one's a first edition as well. So the very first one of these I read is The Other Boleyn Girl. Is probably the most famous one. This is about Mary Boleyn. It is incredibly historically inaccurate, about as historically inaccurate as Braveheart, except not as good. Sorry, Pip. That's the first one I read, and I first read it when I was 16. And then after that, I read, this is another double I have, but you can kind of see that I got wet. After that, I read The Queen's Fool, again when I was 16. So those were the only two I had read going into 2022. And so I reread The Other Boleyn Girl with my friend in 2022. And I was a pretty advanced reader at age 16, but I just didn't really, I don't want to say I didn't really get it, but I didn't get as much out of it as I could have, or as I did when I was like 25 reading it. So after that, I moved on. So I kind of restarted the series, considering it really kind of my first read through. It was my first read through as an adult. I'm going to show you the order I read it in. And I will give you a short history lesson about the Cousins' War. So I already knew a whole lot about the Cousins' War. So I didn't have trouble reading this in the order that I did. But if you're not obsessed with the Middle Ages like I am, you'll have trouble. So I'll kind of walk you through it. Both my parents are very smart people, and they watched the White Queen miniseries with me. I don't think they finished the White Princess miniseries because we know Jodie Comer from Killing Eve, and I don't think they really liked her in the role of Elizabeth of York. To be honest, I don't know that I really did either, but I also don't know if that was Comer's fault with her own acting choices, or if she was given direction like that. Where is my white princess book? It's disappeared. Here it is. So here's Jodie Comer. We love her. She's Villanelle from Killing Eve. She's an incredible actress. She is so underrated. Like, come on. I mean, she does have an Emmy, but she's not like a household name. People need to know who she is. So I didn't really like the portrayal. First of all, I'm getting really off topic. This is a ramble, but I hope you like it. So I feel like this book did kind of accurately portray Elizabeth of York's personality, meaning she didn't have one. Everything I've read about her said she was simple and sweet, and her heart was just bigger than her head. She didn't really have any opinions other than that she loved her children, and she wanted to help the people of England, her father's kingdom, Edward IV. So Jodie Comer gave a volcanic performance in The White Princess, and I just didn't like it. I mean, I did. I liked the series, but that wasn't Elizabeth of York. So I don't know. I can see why my parents, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they haven't finished it, but I kind of think they haven't. If you hear rattling, it's my guinea pig drinking his water. Felix, you're being too loud, buddy. But where was I going? Okay, so the order I read them in. So I basically started my journey, that I'm going to call it. I started in 2022 in April, and I remember it was April because I was reading The Other Boleyn Girl during a really, really bad girl fight that broke out at my school during, right before we were going to take the state standardized testing, the STAR. So that was crazy. So I read this one first, and then I went to The Boleyn Inheritance. This is not the one I read out of. I actually bought this for a shrine that I'm going to make. I mean, I'm joking. It's not really going to be a shrine. It's just going to be a shelf. But Philippa Gregory is an author that really inspires me. I think I'm going to call her writing upmarket because it is a little bit literary, but it's also kind of like book club. So I read The Boleyn Inheritance next, and I read this with my friend. I think this is actually the first buddy read book that I was going to say he beat me reading it, but I don't think he did. I think he was ahead of me for a really long time, and then I just wrestled through it. Because this has really short chapters. And yeah, see, this has really short chapters, so you just blow through it. So I read this one. And then I kind of took a break. No, I didn't. Wow. I said I kind of took a break, but I didn't. So I moved into this apartment in July 2022. And pretty much the first book I read in this apartment was The White Princess. So people have told me, wow, I can't imagine reading The White Princess before reading The White Queen. Well, I actually thought this was The White Queen. And I started reading it, and it did kind of start sort of in media res, but as I said, I already know a lot about English history. I'm obsessed with the Middle Ages. This is the start, technically, of the Tudor period, although this still feels very medieval to my American brain. So I knew who these people were. I didn't struggle. So I read that one. And then I read, where are you? The Kingmaker's Daughter. This is still, let me get it. This is still my favorite one out of all the series. I thought another one was gonna pass it, but that one was just too weirdly written as far as structure. So I read this one next. This is about Anne Neville. She's the wife of Richard III. And I really identified with this character because the Kingmaker's daughter, obviously. The Kingmaker, Edward of Warwick, he did not, or Richard of Warwick, I think, I don't know. So he kind of put all his hopes and dreams on, sold them away in marriage to powerful people who he literally made king. So yeah, so I kind of identified with that. My father grew up very, very poor, but I was a rich kid, and so he kind of wanted me to do all the things he never did and pushed me really hard, and we won't get into that. So after that, I think that was the last one I read in 2022. I read that in like November. Then I started reading this in December. I actually listened to half of this and read half of it. You can't really see it. I was going to say it's kind of cool. You can, never mind. But I listened to half of this because I was on a road trip. I was on like a 5-hour there and back road trip. I did the whole 10 hours in one sitting to take some foster guinea pigs, some guinea pigs I was fostering out to their new home. So I listened to half of this and I read the other half. So that was the 5th book I read. So after that, I think I went straight to Three Sisters, Three Queens. No, this one I listened to in 2022 and then finished up. So yeah, this was another 2022 one. Three Sisters, Three Queens. This is about Henry VIII's sister. And I didn't tell you which ones these are about. These are about Henry VIII's sisters and Catherine of Aragon. This one is about Margaret Pole. And I remember when I was like 14, I went to the Tower of London, and spoiler, I mean, it's history, you can't really spoil, but she was executed by Henry VIII, and she ran around the scaffold. I just remember a story of an executioner trying to chase an old lady around the scaffold to hack her head off, and she was the old lady. And then this one's about Anne Neville. This one's about Elizabeth of York. This one, the Boleyn inheritance, is about Jane Boleyn, the evil Jane Parker in the other Boleyn Girl movie and book. So Jane Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and the wife that got sent away. Anne of Cleves, yeah. And, okay, so where was I? All right, so Three Sisters, Three Queens. And then the next one I read, I do own this book, even though it's a library book, I bought it used, was The Taming of the Queen. This one is one of my favorites. This might be my second favorite. This one was about Catherine Parr and how she survived Henry VIII when he was crazy. And there's actually a really good scene, this kind of famous fantasy portrait right here of his family. There's a really good scene that happens in this one about that portrait. So I read that one next. I am doing this by memory. I should probably look at my Goodreads to like, I don't know, correlate. But after that, I read The Last Tudor. This is about Jane Grey and her two sisters. I really liked this one, but I wish they would have just focused on one of the sisters, not three, because it goes through time, but it's not like it jumps back and forth between the sisters. First we get Jane, then we get Catherine, then we get Mary. Catherine was my favorite. So if the whole thing was about Catherine, I would have enjoyed it more, but it was good. I mean, yeah. So oh shoot, I forgot another one. Okay, February of 2022. No. Wait. Hold on. Yeah, February of 2022. This one was kind of a fluke. I wasn't trying to read the whole series. I actually read this before I read the other Boleyn Girl. This is The Virgin's Lover. It's about Queen Elizabeth and Robert Dudley and Robert Dudley's wife. I talked about this in my works books of 2022. It was kind of sold as a domestic thriller, but it's not. It's a romance between Dudley, Elizabeth, and Amy Robstadt, who's Dudley's wife, getting caught in the middle. So I'm not doing well here, guys, in the order that I read them, but I'm telling you about them. And then, let's see. So The Taming of the Queen. After that, I gotta look around. The Taming of the Queen. After that, I think I began The White Queen. So, The White Queen. This is about Elizabeth Woodville. This is kind of the start of the whole series. Elizabeth Woodville during the Wars of the Roses. After that, I read The Red Queen. This is about Margaret Beaufort. And this is kind of the least popular one, but I did love it because unlike Elizabeth Woodville, most people really hate Margaret Beaufort, but I loved her because stoicism and patience are two things I really, really admire in a person, and it's things I try to emulate, and that is not Elizabeth Woodville. She was emotional, she was impulsive, but she was also a very strong woman. But she wasn't as dignified as Margaret Beaufort. And then after that, I read... I'm looking at the ones. Oh, shoot. I forgot another one. So, The Other Queen. This is the last one chronologically in the series. I don't remember much about this. This is about Mary, Queen of Scots, Queen Elizabeth, George Talbot, and Bess of Hardwicke. So this is kind of like a spy, almost like a spy novel, which is probably why I didn't really care for it. But it was okay. Okay, so after The Red Queen, I read The Constant Princess. I thought this was going to take over The Kingmaker's Daughter for being my favorite, but it didn't. This is about Catherine of Aragon. And the reason it didn't take over is because it's just written in a very weird way. Like, 2/3 of it is written in first person, but it's written in italics. So everything in italics is first person, and everything not in italics is third person, kind of omniscient, but it's free and direct discourse. So that was weird. And yes, I will go ahead and spoil, she does sleep with Prince Arthur in this. This is about her coming to England to marry Prince Arthur. And she sleeps with him, so she lied. A lot of people think she lied, a lot of people didn't. Personally, I don't think she did. I believe her that she never slept with Arthur. And I'll tell you why. Because Arthur, well, he was younger than her. And they couldn't understand each other because he's English, she's Spanish, and they wrote to each other in Latin, but they couldn't understand each other's accent. So they couldn't understand each other. Arthur was very young. He was like 15 when they married, and Catherine was supposedly Christendom. So I have a feeling they probably tried and Arthur came too soon. That's what I think happened. But if this were to have occurred, if she would have slept with Arthur and lied to Henry, I think it would only have been under the circumstance that Gregory presents here. And to be honest, Catherine, she's called Catalina in this book, Catalina and Henry VIII's little meet cute when he goes to get her and bring her back to Arthur was really adorable. It was just so cute. I mean, he was a little kid, and I mean, they were both kind of kids, but he was like 10 and she was kind of like, oh my God, you're so cute. And then he grows up and she's like, I'm doing this for Arthur. So yeah. But after that, I read The Lady of the Rivers. This is about Elizabeth Woodville's mother, who appears in The White Queen and is awesome in The White Queen. And then this is her story. And what's really cool is Jacquetta of Luxembourg, who this is about, knew Joan of Arc. So she's like interacting with Joan of Arc. And then the last one I read was The Queen's Fool, the only one about a fictional character. It's a Jewish girl at the court of Elizabeth's brother and sister, Mary and Edward VI. So, that was a lot. I'm going to go ahead and give you the order I think you should read them in. Now, I told one of my friends, he started with the White Queen first. 100% White Queen first. And now the next is sort of up to you. So we've got the Kingmaker's Daughter and the Red Queen. So this Kingmaker's Daughter takes place pretty much at the exact same time as the White Queen. It's basically sort of the same story, but not really, told from Anne Neville's point of view. She goes through a few different things that then Elizabeth Woodville goes through. But some of the stuff she goes through is mentioned in this one, but they're portrayed in this one. So if you read The Kingmaker's Daughter immediately after the White Queen, you're not going to get what happens next. So it's up to you whether you want to finish the storyline with the Red Queen, or you want to, do you really want to double back after you finish the Red Queen and read from Anne Neville's point of view again? So personally, I would suggest reading this one first because there's a lot of differences between this and the White Queen, because Anne Neville has a heck of a journey, and then this finishes off the whole Cousins War storyline. Sort of. Yeah, that finishes off the Cousins War storyline. But these are all part of what she calls the Cousins War series. So after either the Red Queen or the Kingmaker's Daughter, you should read the White Queen. This picks up right after, like 2 days after the Red Queen leaves off. And then after this, Philippa Gregory actually suggests, I believe, after this, you to read The Constant Princess about Catherine of Aragon. Disagree. Don't do that. So after Elizabeth of York's novel, you should read The King's Curse. And then this is kind of the mid-series finale. This takes place like hours. It picks up literal hours after this one ends. So there we go. That is the Cousins War. That is, well, I didn't talk about this one. So that's kind of the mid-series finale. And then after that, you should probably go back and end with the prequel. I did not do that. Again, this is up to you. End with the prequel, end the Cousins War with the prequel after this mid-series finale here. Or save it for later, which I'll tell you, I really don't think you should start with this one, even though it is the earliest chronologically. So after the mid-season finale there, this is a good one. Three Sisters, Three Queens, or The Constant Princess. Again, up to you. Catherine of Aragon appears in both of these. The Boleyn sisters appear in this one and this one. So there's actually a line in Three Sisters, Three Queens where it's like, oh, these Boleyn girls are causing so much trouble. And when I heard that, because I, again, half read, half listened on an audiobook, this. When I heard that, I was on my way to work and I was like, yes! When I heard that, that was awesome. So either one of these is fine. Catherine of Aragon's appears in both of them, so you can see it from her point of view here, or Margaret's point of view, Margaret being Henry VIII's sister, from here. And they write a lot of letters to each other. It's all told only from Margaret's point of view, but you get the other sisters' viewpoints because they write a lot of letters. So after that, you can go to the other Boleyn girl. A lot of these stories are going to start overlapping. So I say it's kind of up to you whether you want to read, what order you want to read these. You can read this before you read these and you won't miss anything. So again, it's kind of up to you. So these three right here kind of slot in between the two series. So choose which ones you want to read. So after the other Boleyn girl comes the Boleyn inheritance. These can all be read as standalones, but this picks up right after the other Boleyn girl. And then we can go to the Virgin's Lover. Now, if you are not trying to read the entire series, I actually would recommend skipping this one. The best way I can describe it is dumb. It's really just like Elizabeth having a bunch of sex with Robert Dudley, her wife, the poor wife being caught in the middle, and the fact that it's written in free and direct discourse is just, I don't know, I didn't like it. And then next, you can read The Queen's Fool, and then you can round it out with The Last Tudor, and end with, shoot, I forgot more. So The Taming of the Queen, you should read after the Boleyn inheritance. So Boleyn inheritance, Taming of the Queen, and then you can round it out with the other queen. So that was a lot. Now I'm going to give you a history lesson before you read this. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you. And I assume you're thinking about reading it. So let's have a quick history lesson. The Cousins' War, otherwise known as the War of the Roses. We call it the War of the Roses in the United States. So that was fought between the descendants of Edward III, who died, and then his grandson, Richard II, became king at like 10. Because Edward the Black Prince, who you've probably heard of, died before the king, but he already had a son. His son was Richard II, so there we go. So Richard II was deposed by Henry IV, who at the time was the Duke of Lancaster. Lancaster, York, that's who the wars were between. He was deposed by, Richard II was deposed by Henry IV because, sadly, Richard II was mentally ill. They think he had like bipolar and schizophrenia or something like that. So he was deposed because the whole world was falling apart because he was such a terrible king. And after Henry IV came Henry V, and then Henry VI. So Henry VI is a big character in the Cousins' War part of the books. He was even more mentally ill than Richard, but he had married Margaret of Anjou, who Cersei Lannister was partially based on, and they had a son. So it wasn't really Henry VI fighting the Wars of the Roses, it was Margaret. And so Henry VI was unwell. Margaret of Anjou was a woman. So then a man named Richard of York wanted to depose Henry VI and his wife. Well, that didn't work out too well. So he tried to take the crown, and he and his second son, he had 4, were killed at a battle. They cut their heads off, stuck them on spikes, and to mock Richard, they put a paper crown on his head. So to retaliate, Richard's son Edward, his oldest son, went and seized the throne from Catherine of Anjou, and they disappear into Scotland. And these are all descendants of Edward III. And this war basically started all because Richard II, not Richard III. This war all basically started because Richard II was deposed. So we're at Edward IV, okay? He takes the crown. The war's not really over. So there are still Lancastrians trying to fight for the crown. So there's still more battles, more wars. And eventually, Edward IV, he marries Elizabeth Woodville. They have some kids. And he is deposed again by the Kingmaker, who gets Henry VI back on the throne. He tried to get Edward's brother George on the throne, but that didn't work out. By marrying one of his daughters, that didn't work out. So they turn their coat to Lancaster and marry Anne Neville onto the character Joffrey was based on. So, like, in this Cousins War series, you can basically just go through and pick out Game of Thrones characters from all of these. I'm pretty sure Sansa Stark was based on Anne Neville. I don't know. But continuing on. So, that Prince Edward, not the same as Edward IV, dies in battle. Elizabeth Woodville finally gives birth to a son, but she had taken sanctuary in Westminster Abbey. No one can come get them in a church. She gives birth. Edward takes back the throne, and then Edward basically lives out his reign until he gets sick and dies. And Elizabeth Woodville's brother, Anthony, was very influential in the princes' lives, the princes in the Tower. But on his deathbed, Edward says, I want my brother Richard to be Lord Protector. And Elizabeth's like, wait, no, don't you mean Anthony? And he's like, no, Richard. So to kind of appease him, she's like, okay. And so Richard becomes Lord Protector, puts Edward in the Tower for his coronation. Edward V, one of the princes in the Tower. Richard of Shrewsbury, Edward's brother, goes in the Tower too, and they never come out. Richard III crowns himself king, and then Henry VII, so he was Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor was a descendant of John of Gaunt, and so they fight the battle at Bosworth Field. Henry takes the crown. The Middle Ages end in England, and in order to stop the wars, he marries Elizabeth of York. They have kids. The Tudor dynasty begins. So there you go. And yes, Game of Thrones, most people know, was based on the War of the Roses. And you can go through and read these books and watch these series and just pick out characters. Like the Yorks, Lords of the North, York, Stark, Lancaster, Lannister. It's pretty obvious. So if you stuck around for this whole video, good for you. If you didn't, I don't blame you, and you're not even here to listen. So that is my review, guide, rambling about the Tudor and Plantagenet series by Philippa Gregory. Thanks, guys.